Hello, welcome to the Heartful Evaluation Webinar Series. Remember the art in Heartful because this webinar series is all about best approaches for the evaluation of arts-based programs and their impact. Today I will be covering a traditional evaluation framework known as the Logic Model Framework. This evaluation framework is used throughout industries, including within the medical field, social services, and the arts and cultural sector. It is a framework that is transferable throughout disciplines because its purpose is not exclusively useful to one field. Primarily, the framework sets up a structured approach for determining the research needs surrounding the evaluation of a program, regardless of what the program is. The framework provides program evaluators with a sense of direction by focusing on determining the program's outcome goals, inputs, activities, outputs, and final outcomes. The following diagram of the Logic Model Framework was included as part of a guide on program evaluation. The guide was developed by the Georgia Council for the Arts and the National Assembly of State Art Agencies in the United States. I have attached a link to the document below the video. While the guide was developed in the United States, the information is just as useful and applicable to the work of Canadian-based arts and cultural organizations. This diagram outlines the steps followed in a Logic Model Framework. First, the program's outcome goals must be determined. From then, program evaluators have a closer look at the inputs, activities, and outputs in relation to the program. The collection and analysis of these pieces of data help determine whether the program has met its outcome goals effectively and what impact the program has made on its participants. This diagram also serves as the agenda for today's webinar. The webinar will cover steps in the Logic Model Framework in the order shown in the diagram: outcome goals, inputs, activities, outputs, and final outcomes. Before proceeding, let's quickly define two major key concepts. 1. What is program evaluation? And 2. What are indicators? Program evaluation is the process of assessing the impact, successes, and needs of a program. By putting together a program evaluation report, an organization can effectively communicate the impact, successes, and needs of their program to stakeholders such as funding bodies, private donors, corporate sponsors, patrons, and community partners. Indicators are measurable data gathered to assess whether the program has met its outcome goals and made an impact on participants. Indicators include input indicators, resources necessary to achieve outcome goals such as people, partners, funds, materials, and space. Process indicators, which are the direct products and deliverables of the program, such as activities and output. Activities are the actions, steps, events, and activities necessary to achieve outcome goals. Outputs are the products generated as a result of a program, such as artwork created during the program, increased memberships or increased membership renewals, raised funds, and the distribution of marketing or advocacy materials. Outcome indicators are pieces of data that determine overall impact and changes resulting from the delivery of a program. All the indicators that have just been mentioned are the steps outlined in the Logic Model Framework diagram. Outcome goals are synonymous with a program's objectives. Before starting the evaluation of a program, one must know the objectives of the program itself. Those program objectives become the desirable outcomes of the program. In order to determine the program objectives and desirable outcomes, one must ask, what impact is this program intended to make? Below this video, I've included a link to an extremely helpful graphic organizer developed by Callahan Consulting for the Arts, which outlines different forms of outcomes that can result from an arts-based program. Outcomes may include changes in awareness, attitudes, behaviors, goals, aspirations, and values. Factors such as increased participation or discourse generated as a result of a program are additional examples of program outcomes. As a case study, we will look at how local arts service organization East End Arts initiated an evaluation process for one of its new programs, known as East End Love. The first step was to clearly define East End Love's program objective and desirable outcomes. According to program coordinator Adam Champong, East End Love is a community-engaged public art project which uses visual arts and collaboration to produce images that communicate messages of community, acceptance, inclusivity, anti-racism, anti-discrimination, and love. Images will be disseminated throughout the East Toronto community to flood the streets with positive images produced by community members. The desirable program outcomes would include the following: create an East Toronto-wide public response to the increased instances of hateful, exclusionary discourse and actions in East Toronto. Through engaging and supportive workshops, provide community members with the tools to utilize visual arts to respond to the presence of discrimination, exclusion, hate, violence, and racism within their communities of East Toronto. Help community members of East Toronto feel a deeper sense of belonging, safety, and pride through using community-engaged public art. The desirable program outcomes would include the following: create an East Toronto-wide public response to the increased instances of hateful, exclusionary discourse and actions in East Toronto. Through engaging and supportive workshops, provide community members with the tools to utilize visual arts to respond to the presence of discrimination, exclusion, hate, violence, and racism within their communities of East Toronto. Help community members of East Toronto feel a deeper sense of belonging, safety, and pride through using community-engaged public art. Determining inputs is part of the process of putting in place the necessary resources for achieving the program objective and desirable outcomes. When looking specifically at the East End Love program, inputs would include the participants, staff members, community members, funds, spaces, and materials involved in the program. Delivery. Funding bodies are particularly interested in learning who is directly involved in the delivery of a program and who is possibly impacted by the program outcomes. Activities taking place as part of East End Love include 3 printmaking workshops to be led by arts facilitator Laura LaCurcia during the months of March and April 2019. Participants of the workshop will produce prints that communicate messages of community acceptance, inclusivity, anti-racism, anti-discrimination, and love. These images will later be disseminated throughout the East Toronto community to flood the streets with positive images produced by community members. Workshops are expected to take place during the following dates and at the following locations: Saturday, March 23rd, 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. at the Access Point on the Danforth in East Toronto. Monday, April 1st, 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. at Crescent Town Club in East Toronto. Monday, April 8th, 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. at the St. Matthew's Clubhouse, the Office of East End Arts. As outputs are the products generated as a result of a program, in the case of East End Love, the outputs generated would be participants' stenciled prints and the later public exhibition and dissemination of their artwork. Earlier on, I stressed the importance of determining the outcome goals of a program, also known as the program objectives, before proceeding with the evaluation of the program. The outcome goals help determine the research objectives behind the evaluation process. Every outcome goal can be transformed into a research objective. For instance, I will demonstrate how each of the outcome goals behind East End Love can be transformed into a research objective that helps guide the program evaluation process. The outcome goal to create an East Toronto-wide public response to the increased instances of hateful, exclusionary discourse and actions in East Toronto can be formulated into the following research question: does East End Love create an East Toronto-wide public response to the increased instances of hateful, exclusionary discourse and actions in East Toronto? The outcome goal to provide community members with the tools to utilize visual arts to respond to the presence of discrimination, exclusion, hate, violence, and racism within their communities of East Toronto can be formulated into the following research question: does East End Love provide effective tools that help participants use visual arts as a way to proactively respond to acts of discrimination, exclusion, hate, violence, and racism within their communities? The last outcome goal to help community members of East Toronto feel a deeper sense of belonging, safety, and pride through using community-engaged public art can be formulated into the following research question. Does East and Love help participants feel a deeper sense of belonging, safety, and pride through using community-engaged art? Essentially, research objectives are meant to guide the evaluation process towards addressing whether the outcome goals have been met and what the final outcomes look like. There are various assessment methods that can be used to address the research objectives. Certain tools are more appropriate in certain situations or in order to obtain certain types of data. Americans for the Arts is an organization that aims to bring visibility to arts for social change, and the organization is involved in creating useful resources for the arts and culture sector. The organization has identified 4 key approaches to collecting data as a way of evaluating a program. The 4 key approaches include gathering oral responses, gathering written responses, documenting existing data, and documenting observations. Oral responses may be gathered through interviews, story circles, oral histories, and focus groups. These are all examples of qualitative data focused on the quality of experiences. Written responses may be gathered through surveys, questionnaires, feedback forms, and opinion polls. These approaches can be used to gather both qualitative and quantitative data focused on the quality of experiences, as well as data that is quantifiable and expressed in numbers. Existing data may include participant journals, portfolios, and/or artworks, as well as attendance records, demographic data, and data from past surveys. Formative observations include observing and documenting activities, events, and dialogue that occurs while the program takes place. The observer at times is a non-participant and sometimes takes on the role of a participant. Formative is used to describe observational assessment because it takes place as the program is carried out rather than at the end of the program. When the evaluation and assessment takes place at the end of the program, it is known as a summative assessment, such as in the case of assessing survey results. East and Love's first program objective or outcome goal is to create an East Toronto-wide public response to the increased instances of hateful, exclusionary discourse and actions in East Toronto. The program objective can be formulated into the following research objective or research question. Does East and Love create an East Toronto-wide public response to the increased instances of hateful, exclusionary discourse and actions in East Toronto? This research objective would be best addressed by gathering photographic documentation of the dissemination of images throughout East Toronto that communicate messages of community, acceptance, inclusivity, anti-racism, anti-discrimination, and love. Additionally, it would be beneficial to maintain a record of the sites and neighborhoods in East Toronto where the dissemination of artwork has taken place. The research objective can also be addressed through conducting additional surveys on individuals who pass the public artwork in order to inquire about their experiences of the artwork. East and Love's second program objective or outcome goal is to provide effective tools that help participants use visual arts as a way to proactively respond to acts of discrimination, exclusion, hate, violence, and racism within their communities. This program objective can be formulated into the following research objective or research question. Does East and Love provide effective tools that help participants use visual arts as a way to proactively respond to acts of discrimination, exclusion, hate, violence, and racism within their communities? This research objective can be explored by gathering and analyzing survey data from participants' feedback forms. Some questions to consider including on the feedback form are as follows. What did you do or create at this workshop? Please be as descriptive as possible. How do you foresee the East and Love project making a difference in your community? How has this East and Love workshop helped you in terms of learning about and or addressing issues in your community? These 3 questions explore the research objective through gathering qualitative data about the experiences of participants during the workshop for later analysis. Asking a close-ended question would help gather quantitative data to help quantify into number or percentage how many of the participants felt that the East and Love workshop helped them to use visual arts as a way to proactively respond to acts of discrimination, exclusion, hate, violence, and racism within their communities. An example of such a question would be, will you be able to use anything you learned from the workshop in the future? Possible answers would be yes or no. It would be best to provide examples of things that can be learned during the workshop and used later on, such as a new art skill or a new approach or information that can be used to stand up against racism and discrimination. In order to learn how the new skill, approach, or information would be used by participants, a prompt can be provided and paired with the close-ended question. For instance, if yes, please explain. East and Love's third program objective or outcome goal is to help participants feel a deeper sense of belonging, safety, and pride through using community-engaged art. This program objective can be formulated into the following research objective or research question. Does East and Love help participants feel a deeper sense of belonging, safety, and pride through using community-engaged art? This research objective can be explored by gathering and analyzing survey data from participants' feedback forms. In order to measure impact, it would be beneficial to consider providing participants with pre- and post questionnaires with identical questions. If participants change up their answer to the same question, it may suggest that they have experienced some form of individual growth as a result of their participation in the program. Two examples of rating scale questions suitable for pre- and post questionnaires that can help determine whether East and Love helps participants feel a deeper sense of belonging, safety, and pride are as follows. On a scale of 1 to 5, rate your level of belonging within the East Toronto community. 1. No sense of belonging. 2. Little sense of belonging. 3. Some sense of belonging. 4. Good sense of belonging. 5. High sense of belonging. The second rating scale question in the form of a statement would be, I feel welcomed in the community, and then participants have the opportunity to respond with one of the following. 1. Not at all. 2. Rarely. 3. Sometimes. 4. Most of the time. 5. Always. Providing a few words, ideally as little as possible, to define each rating helps to ensure that all participants interpret certain ratings in the exact same manner. This ensures consistency in understanding amongst participants of the same questions. If before a workshop a participant states feeling no sense of belonging and then post-workshop reports feeling a good sense of belonging, it may be due to the workshop having played some role in improving the participants' feeling of belonging to the East Toronto community. An additional example of a question that can help determine whether East and Love helps participants feel a deeper sense of belonging, safety, and pride would be as follows. Has the East and Love project provided you with a safe space to use visual art to interpret feelings surrounding community discrimination, prejudice, and racism? As a close-ended question, the possible answers would be either yes or no. This question should be asked in a post-questionnaire following the completion of an East and Love workshop. This question helps gather quantitative data. By gathering data from asking this question to participants, East and Arts would be able to report the number or percentage of participants who felt that East and Love provided them with a safe space to use visual art to interpret feelings surrounding community discrimination, prejudice, and racism. I like to pair close-ended questions that gather quantitative data with a related open-ended question that gathers qualitative data. For instance, I would pair the question, Has the East and Love project provided you with a safe space to use visual art to interpret feelings surrounding community, discrimination, prejudice, and racism? With the question, if yes, how has East and Love provided you with a safe space to use visual art to interpret feelings surrounding community, discrimination, prejudice, and racism? If no, what can be improved? I simply switched out the has at the beginning of a close-ended question with how and what to transform it into an open-ended question that gathers related qualitative data. It may also be beneficial to inquire about the demographics of the participants. Certain communities experience accessibility to programming differently. By inquiring whether participants belong to any of the priority equity groups identified by the Ontario Arts Council and the Toronto Arts Council, Eastern Arts would be able to determine whether the program has been made accessible and reachable to the priority equity groups. If there was a pattern of individuals who identify as belonging to a certain equity group and also report negative experiences, there could have been possible instances of exclusion. Identifying these pieces of data would help an organization to address such situations. That is not to say it would necessarily happen, but it is a good practice to put an evaluation process in place as a way of determining how members of different diverse communities and equity groups experience the workshop. Looking back at the logic model framework, an evaluation process starts with determining the program objectives and outcome goals. Before a program is designed, the objectives of the program must be made clear. Program objectives are determined by asking, what is the purpose of the program? What difference does the program aim to make through its design and delivery? The program objectives become the outcome goals, the desirable and expected results of the program. The inputs are the necessary human resources, materials, funds, and spaces required to achieve the outcome goals of the program. The activities are the necessary events and steps to achieve the outcome goals. The outputs are the artifacts generated as a result of the program. Some examples are increased attendees, increased memberships, or increased membership renewals as a result of the program, and the creation of artwork as a result of putting the program in place. Final outcomes may differ from the outcome goals. In order to determine what the final outcomes are and whether the outcome goals have been met, assessment must take place. Assessment can occur by conducting interviews, administrating surveys, observing the program, and noting the observations. No matter what assessment method an organization decides to use to gather data as part of the program evaluation process, the logic model framework is a useful way to guide the evaluation process. Thank you for listening, and I hope that this webinar has been of use to you. Stay tuned next week for a webinar